Okay. On that note, Janie, I would note that there is one discussion item to add under new business, um, which is an emergency authority document. Not going to be asking for any action, just mentioning the um, existence and discussion of
Of emerg, say that again?
an emergency authority document.
Okay.
And can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So that I believe takes us to public comment. And Martha, you had indicated that you wanted to be a member of the public, I believe.
Uh, yes. This is Martha. I just wanted to say, I'm in a couple of different library and networking groups on Facebook and such, and I've read about a lot of different library responses to this. And I've read some real horror stories from, people that work at libraries that are refusing to close, or, still making their staff come in. And I, this whole thing has kind of made me realize that I take a lot of things for granted, and that some things I don't even know that I'm taking for granted because I just kind of expect that they'll be there. And one of those things is having working for an organization with a sensible administration that values the health and safety of both the staff and the public. So I just wanted to express my gratitude as a staff member for for everyone for taking this seriously, and valuing the health and safety of both the staff and the patrons that we serve. And also just to say Eric's doing a phenomenal job. The library is very lucky to have him. And that's all I have to say.
Yay, Eric.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, Eric. Thank all of you. I'm very impressed with everything you're doing.
You're here.
Yeah. Thank you.
We have a great staff.
Yeah,
We really do.
This is Kathy, and Eric and I have talked a couple of times in the last 3 weeks, I guess. And I do agree he's doing an outstanding job. There's absolutely no way that anyone could be prepared to have a leadership position in a situation like this. And it occurred to me this particular staff has gone through a serious economic downturn and a pandemic, and all the while they're good-natured, and our community continues to praise them. So I did ask Erica a while ago to pass along our good, on behalf of the board, our good wishes to all of our employees, and just telling them to hunker down. That's kind of the Lake Bluff way, and that's what we're all doing. And we would expect nothing less from the people who are asking service of us. So kudos as always to our staff and to Eric. And I know it's hard. I know it's really, really hard. But just keep it up. And the support we see from you guys helps the whole community. So it's very much appreciated.
Yeah. And I can only second the praise for the staff. Everybody's pulled together and done real well. Uh, you know, Martha in particular, was super helpful in helping us get together the pandemic plans that I and the other senior staff were working on the week before the closure actually happened, so that we did have a checklist that we were able to sit down and go through and plan everything out. So everybody's just been amazing.
I have to, I'm sorry, I have to interject. Hearing pulling together the pandemic plans is something I'd never thought I'd heard in my life. So amazing that you could even think clearly enough. So thank you for all of that.
Yeah, when things started going, they started going very fast, and we needed a lot of those plans, as it turned out, almost as soon as we really dug into the meat of them and, put together the initial draft and started working through things. And then, generally we would pretty much immediately need it. where ordinarily we would probably have kicked it around for a week or so and, polished it a bit, but needs must. On that note, I think the next item on the agenda here would be the minutes. Kathy, I kind of jumped in here to moving us through the agenda since with being the host for the WebEx, I'm kind of at the control panel
Yeah.
here, as it were. Is that okay if I?
Eric, I think it's a great idea for you to go ahead and conduct this. Yes, please do.
Okay, sounds good. I just didn't want to be stepping on your toes. Okay,
Yeah, go right. Step away.
All right.
I meant step away, like step away and keep going. I didn't mean step away and go away. I'm sorry.
Stay with us.
Continue.
Eric?
Eric, I think we've lost your sound, or at least on my end.
Yeah, I don't have it.
I can't hear Eric at all.
Nor can
He's,
I.
he's poking at it, trying to figure it out, it looks like.
Okay.
Has he been overwhelmed with the responsibility of conducting the meeting?
Not easy.
No.
Still
Nope.
can't.
There you are.
We hear you.
Can you hear me?
No.
No sound.
There it is.
No, it just came back
There
there.
it is.
I'm good.
Yes.
Yeah.
You're good
Okay.
now.
Yeah.
Fun with technology. Now of all times, I think I've already been. I'm averaging about 7 or 8 Zoom meetings or WebEx meetings a week with all of this, so that's the first time I've had that cut out. But the minutes for February 18th. Any questions, comments on those? Hearing none, I would ask for a motion to approve.
Move to approve.
Who was that?
I think that was John.
It was John.
That was John.
And this is Scott, and I'll second.
Okay. Moving very quickly then for through the votes. Trustee Butler,
Yes.
Hayes,
Yes.
Heinzelman,
Yes.
Jackson,
Yes.
Church,
Yes.
Meyerhoff,
Yes.
and Stroh.
Aye.
Excellent. Okay. Minutes are approved. Takes us up to the financial reports. So thanks to the COVID-19 closure, we have an interesting curveball in terms of a lot of things, including the financials. One part of that is that we've got about a week and a half of expenses yet to be journalized, basically included in the financial reports from March. But then after that, we are, for a lot of the budget lines, the document that I had sent out with this packet is going to be pretty much the final, most likely, for a lot of those budget lines. We're not purchasing any more physical materials while we're closed because we're not, taking any delivery. There's nobody there to take any delivery. We're not booking programs for the very simple reason that we don't know when we're going to be open again, which makes it tough to say, yeah, we'd love to have you here in July or August. Well, hopefully we can have you here in July or August. Not knowing, there's just a lot that we can't do, and being closed means there's a lot that we can't do as well. Payroll is still happening. E-materials is happening in a big way. Postage and electronic resources are still active lines in the budget, but a lot of the other lines came to an early conclusion in terms of expenses. So that is the main big thing that I would highlight with the financial reports here as distributed. Any questions on the yellow sheets? Although I suppose they're not yellow this time. They're They're the same color as everything else. They're the white sheets.
Eric, this is Scott. A real quick question on the e-books. Are things getting backed up with that? Are a lot of patrons utilizing e-books at this point?
I've been keeping tabs on that. Anna Pfeifhaus is our purchaser for our ebook collections, and she reports that the circulation and usage is definitely up, but that the wait times and hold lists are not increasing. So that's a plus. It is something that we're keeping an eye on, and I would anticipate making some additional funds available. I'm kind of hoping that to free up some additional funds from the budget anyway to support those, but we'll particularly add the support on if we see that starting to be a problem. But
Yeah,
summary,
Eric, it's Kathy.
yeah,
The waits on the ebooks are pretty long. I mean, I don't
yes,
know if they're getting any longer than usual, but
yeah.
they're pretty darn long.
My Media Mall is notorious for its hold list length,
Yeah.
unfortunately. So those aren't getting any worse. Yeah, I mean, just given the situation, we you know, as I said, we are looking at pushing more titles out in the local advantage collection so that we can improve the availability. And I should also note that Hoopla, that we did increase the number of titles that patrons can check out in a month through there. And we also increased the number of, well, My Media Mall also increased as part of an effort that the consortium is making, the number of titles that someone could have checked out at one time there. So the capacity there's been increased, and likely we'll continue to see more support. I mean, that is what it is. We can't get the physical materials to people right now, so need to support the
Right.
digital. Martha, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe we went from 4 or 5 to 8 for Hoopla.
For both Hoopla and Canopy, yes.
Hoopla and Canopy. Canopy's the streaming videos. Any other questions on the financial reports? If not, then I would look for a motion to approve.
I so move. This is Cal.
I will second. This is Scott.
Okay. Going through the trustees for the vote. Scott,
Yes.
Bill,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
Kate,
Yep.
Janie,
Yes.
Kathy,
Yes.
and Cal.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, that brings us up to the checks. So there's a few checks here, obviously, that in terms of the register that are items that may end up not happening. We've got, unfortunately, a few checks in here for some wonderful programs and programmers that represent at present canceled programs. When we've had a cancellation in the past, snowstorms, inclement weather, illness on the part of a presenter, our plan A is always to reschedule the program if possible. And, then if the program still isn't able to happen, then the check would not be sent out. So for those checks, I did want to highlight that the distribution of those checks where it's being cut in advance for a programmer and we would ordinarily be handing it to a programmer, things like that, that they're still dependent on receiving the service on that check being distributed. So we are hopeful that once we get going and get open again here, that we will be able to reschedule a lot of the programs that we had to, and unfortunately probably will still have to cancel for the time being. Any particular questions on any of the checks?
Yes, Janie here. So do I understand correctly that the checks have been cut but have not been given to the people who are going to present these programs, have not been mailed out or anything? And you're just going to hold them until such time as hopefully those will be rescheduled?
Right. The way that we handle payment for the programmers is that we'll cut the check in advance, and then they're presented with the check when they come in to do the program. So seems to be most equitable, fairest system that, and it's worked well.
Okay.
And certainly, you know, a situation like this, which you never have to see, I think highlights why, you know, you do want to be careful not to just mail everything out in advance. Good
So
question, Janie.
Kathy, so would the handing over of this check depend upon a future presentation, or regardless of whether or not there is a presentation?
We would, yeah, it would be dependent on the presentation. The
So you're
contracts that we,
basically hoping that you.
yeah, the contract contracts where they exist, as well as just the workflow. The deliverable with our presenters is the presentation that they make.
Right.
And, you know, we pay once the deliverables been provided.
Gotcha. Okay.
This is Scott. This is a little bit of an out of left field question, but I'm going back to what Martha said at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
Are there actually libraries that are open, that are operating?
I'm not aware of any that are nearby. I believe that there's still some libraries that are open in states that have low case totals for COVID-19. I know that there have been some states out Great Plains area, as well as Texas and Hawaii. They've not had big totals of cases thus far, and there's been reluctance to close. Some of that is local leaders, some of it's state leaders. I know in the state of Illinois that the mayor for Chicago was very reluctant to close CPL, the Chicago Public Libraries, and they were open almost a good 3 or 4 days after I think just about everybody else in the state was already closed in terms of libraries. So,
But as far as you know, there are no libraries in Cook or Lake County that are open
there are
and
none.
or running any kind of program.
No. There's nobody open. In terms of Lake County, I kept very close tabs on that situation when we were weighing whether we were going to close. I made a spreadsheet. I know, surprise. But you know, at a certain point, just the end state of that spreadsheet was that everybody was just closed for Lake County, and I'm aware that the same is true for Cook. That's Cook and McHenry being the neighboring counties. There's a high amount of discussion and involvement between the libraries in those counties.
Eric,
Thank you.
I've got a question. I'm sorry.
Fire away.
I have a question about the building maintenance. We have monthly costs for cleaning and for landscape or snow. Are those services continuing during the closure?
The landscaping is. because the landscaping is capable, as with anything involving growing stuff, of becoming a bit of a jungly nightmare if we
Yeah.
just let it go. So that is ongoing. We did stop the cleaning of the inside of the facilities. Uh, there wasn't a pressing reason without traffic going through the library to have somebody in 3 days a week. So we did halt that for the time being, and instead thought in terms of just committing ourselves to a really good deep cleaning when we opt to reopen.
Good. Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Absolutely before.
Yeah.
To me, that's just essential. I know nobody's been in and out of there, but by far, that would be, I think, good for our patrons and staff before anybody goes back there. So it's good.
Right. And then the rest is just, again, if it's related to ongoing usage of the facilities, it's on hold. Things that are related to the upkeep and maintenance of the building, like making sure that the furnace system, the HVAC system, is working. That stuff's ongoing, and we're making sure that is still happening. The building, along with our staff, those are kind of our core critical resources, and things that need to be looked after. Any other questions?
No.
No?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Good. I'm good.
Excellent. In that case, I would look for a motion to approve checks 14,320 to 14,326 and 14,329 to 14,351.
This is Cal. I so move.
This is John.
Scott,
Second.
Oh, somebody beat me to it.
All right. So we will go through the trustee roll call for the vote. Scott.
Yes.
Bill.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Kate.
Yes.
Janie.
Yes.
Kathy.
Yes.
And Cal.
Aye.
All right, excellent. And that takes us then up to committee reports. The only committee I believe that met since the last board meeting was the Finance Committee, which was discussion related to the budget. Finance, Bill, I believe you're the new head of the
Right.
Finance Committee, correct?
Right. I didn't know if we wanted to wait to go through the actual budget reading on section 8. I mean, that was the main thing that we got together on. We went through a number of iterations, and this is the final draft for review for the board.
I think we can. It'll be the first item here in new business. I think we
Right.
can jump in after the committee reports. Only other committee item, I think, feel free to correct me and jump in, would be an update from the HR committee.
Yeah, this is Scott. I think I've reached out multiple times to everybody to get your input. One committee member asked me to resend out the goals from a year ago, which I finally did today. Today was supposed to be the end of input. Today is Tuesday. I'll give you until the end of this week, but lacking any other input between now and Friday, I'm going to go ahead and complete the review. We really wanted to have April be the month that we completed the process of finalizing Eric's evaluation. So I don't want to wait any longer than the end of this week to finalize that. So I hope that's been clear to everybody along the way.
Yes, it has.
It has.
Clear. Yep.
Yes. Yeah, Scott, this is Kathy.
Yeah.
I certainly agree with that. I would go a step further just for everyone's information. I would encourage us, the HR, so you're going to finish the input receiving and then completing the evaluation. I think it's an essential goal that we have to keep to our schedule and to do this in a timely fashion. And I think HR could go ahead and meet remotely after you've completed the review. And even if necessary, I think if the HR committee approves or agrees on the content of the evaluation, that you and whoever else could go ahead and meet remotely with Eric if necessary. I know it's a very impersonal way of doing a performance review, but I think out of respect for Eric, we want to maintain a schedule as best we can and see this through if possible.
I totally agree, Kathy. Eric and I actually had an exchange on this earlier today. And the only hesitation that I had about this, and I said I would take my direction from Eric on this, which is how do I send out the materials and how do we go about organizing the meeting? But I agree with you. I think within the next couple of days, we should set a meeting date for the HR committee. And then I'll have an end date to have a draft of the evaluation done so I can send it to you and Janie.
Great.
So I'm completely with you. I don't want this to go beyond April 30th.
Yeah. Well, that's actually a whole month from now, so I think we're on firm ground about that. So thank you very much, Eric, and to all the trustees who have helped. Excuse me, thank you, Scott, and to all the trustees who have helped Scott in getting this put together.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks everybody.
Okay. Anything else to report from any of the other committees before we move on? Oh, actually, Janie, this would probably be a good point in terms of building and grounds to mention the tree.
Okay, Janie here. Some of you may or may not be aware that, well, if you remember, Bill Nordine approached us about planting a trail tree on the lawn. Actually, Bill and I and Jillian and the Dahlmans came and spoke about it a little bit. And I'm still not sure that Bill has a real handle on what the Dahlman garden is. I haven't had a chance to talk with him about that yet. But it was pretty clear that the Dahlmans don't want any changes made to their part of the garden, for which I don't blame them at all, especially this particular one. And then we talked about putting it on the west side, say over behind the oval sign that says Lake Bluff Library. But then Kathy and I spoke a little bit about that and sort of came to the conclusion that that's not really an ideal location for it either. Unfortunately, I was out of town, and then when we came back, everything sort of closed up. I was going to call a B&G meeting to talk about it and didn't get the opportunity. So in emailing back and forth with Eric about that over the last day or two, I think what we've decided to do is I'm going to contact both Bill and Dennis Downs, who is the trail marker tree guy, and let them know that there will be no action taken on planting a tree at least this year. And then you maybe suggest to Bill some alternate locations, but I and Kathy and several other people, and tell me please if you have anything to weigh in on this, but we just kind of feel like the landscaping is lovely the way it is. All the specimens of various things, the crabapple, all of those things out there are healthy and beautiful and well-maintained and at the peak of their maturity, and we just don't want to see any of that disturbed. So that's kind of how we're feeling about it.
This is Cal. I agree with you. I don't think the library, we don't have an awful lot of open space outside of the library, and I don't think it's the place for a trail tree. Trail trees tend to sort of dwarf everything else around them, so I'm not in favor of sticking a trail tree anywhere on the library grounds.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Janie, Eric here.
Yeah.
As I expressed in our back and forth, it's still an idea that I kind of like. I am having trouble similarly picturing exactly where on the property we're going to put this, particularly as I've been out there and done some measuring and tried to really kind of scope out where a mature tree would end up growing into on the property. But I think the long and short of it at this point is that the meetings that we would need in order to finalize anything on this are not really feasible, and the notion of getting everybody together for this planting event in any case is just complete no-go.
That's right.
So we're not going to go.
I don't think anyone will be surprised.
No.
All right.
So that's the trail tree update. And Janie's been been super helpful, doing really good work coordinating that with Dennis and Bill. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I wish that something better would come of it, but not to be.
No worries. No worries. It's not like you're actively running around covering up the spots where trail trees could go, Janie. So
True.
okay. I believe then that takes us up to new business. The first and central item of which is the budget for fiscal year 2020, 2021. The budget, as is currently presented, was approved by the Finance Committee on March 11th, which was approximately 24 hours before things pretty much everywhere became very interesting. The budget does contain within it the assumption that we will be implementing auto renewals and then monitoring the auto renewals and the fine revenue with a goal of gauging when we go to fine free. So basically, the assumption of going with auto renewals with an understanding that we're moving towards fine free, that becoming the norm for libraries. The budget does not include an expectation that we'll be open on the summer on Sundays as initial drafts had. There's been some discussion, and I've gone, back and forth as well as approaching some of the folks at the village just to see what they were doing as to what effect this pandemic might have on the budget and the expectations for next year. I mean, what it comes down to is that in terms of revenue and expenses, it's definitely going to have an impact in terms of where we direct money towards and what we receive as far as revenue. But it's difficult at this point to really gauge what in fullness that's going to be. We are fortunate in that the village operates with an accounting system that does afford a pretty good amount of flexibility in terms of the operations throughout the year. Generally, we hew pretty tightly to what we budget for, just because that's the most sensible thing. It's the easiest thing. It's the most transparent thing. But as needed, there is flexibility within the framework for accounting that the budget that the village makes use of. So the recommendation then is still that this budget document be approved. Things are just at this point too unclear to really draft anything different. My understanding from the village is that they are making a few changes to their document, but what they're really focusing on is deferring some capital expenses. They had a lot of capital projects that they were planning to queue up for this next year ahead. In particular, a number of projects such as the Green Bay Road project that were going to involve some expenses that were going to be partly paid by the state. And their best estimate right now is a lot of those funds aren't going to be available for some of those joint projects. Some things they're just making a decision to hold off another year on as well, just so that if they need to lean more heavily on their reserves, that they have as much of those as possible. The village is in a slightly different situation than we are in that they are principally dependent on sales tax. That's their big revenue source. They get about 30% or so of revenue from property tax, which is not insignificant. But I think they're up to 35 to 40%, maybe even more now as far as reliance budgetarily on that sales tax. And the sales tax, of course, is taking pretty big hit right now. Cars make up a big portion of that, and understandably, people are not buying cars at the moment. So, any questions on the budget document?
Eric, this is Scott. I'm sorry, you may have said this and I just blanked on it. Is the village now not looking for us to provide them with our final budget approval?
They are.
Is that
They are. Yeah, they are still looking for us to provide that. I believe it's April 13th is the
okay.
budget the village budget hearing, where fingers crossed they will be presenting that and doing the big public hearing. I'm not completely certain how they're going to work the logistics of that because it seems very likely that we will be in peak pandemic at that point.
Yeah,
close to it.
yeah. That's really what I was wondering, was how logistically they would move ahead with this, and it doesn't seem possible that they'll be able to do that before the summer.
They've been making a lot of use of WebEx, the software that we're using for the call and discussion tonight. That was how they handled their emergency meeting. They would likely expect more turnout and definitely more participation for a budget hearing. So I don't know. Glenn, who's the assistant village administrator, is proven to be really good with a lot of this technology and getting these digital meetings in place. So I'm sure he'll figure something out. But it seems very unlikely that they would have a conventional meeting.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't think they're allowed to under the recent extension till April 30th. I mean, they don't have a choice of that.
I think you're right. But they did have when they did the emergency. Oh, sorry, I interrupted, Kathy. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead, Eric, please.
When they did the emergency meeting, they basically had Kathy and Drew at the village hall, made use of the AV system that they have built in there, and then allowed people to text or email in questions or to phone in and listen. And it was available, of course, as a stream as well. So they'll probably do something along those lines. They have a pretty nice AV setup there to work with in Village Hall.
Yeah.
And again, this is Scott, and this is a question that obviously did not come up in the Finance Committee meeting, but if theoretically the library is closed, just pick a date, let's say until the end of August, would you envision any of the numbers in this budget proposal changing in a dramatic way?
If I knew that we were going to be closed that long, yeah, there would definitely be some numbers that I would change. The chief challenge here is that the estimates are kind of all over the place at the moment. So there's within the realm of possibility would be that we were at least partially open at some point in May. But at the same time, August is entirely possible. September is entirely possible. What I've got to go along with this document here is something that I've worked up with staff, which is basically a working budget document that would be for various closures of various lengths, how that would look in terms of how we would approach the actual expenses and the day-to-day allotment of funds. Some of the funds we would definitely are definitely planning to approach on kind of a more of a sliding scale. Logically, the longer that we're closed, the more in terms of expenses and the more that we're spending on e-resources is going to edge to be a higher percentage of our total collections budget. If we were closed through October or November, I would expect that we would end up shifting a lot of funds that direction. Whereas, if we ended up and we were opening again in early June or sometime in May, partially or even further to the public, then we might end up with a budget that gets expended pretty normally to how we're approving it now. The big problem is just not knowing. And that being the case, what we want is a really solid baseline budget that really lays out a good starting point for expenses for the year ahead, which is what this does.
Yeah, so if you're presenting to the village in mid-April, they're going to understand that there's a big caveat with whatever you're giving them.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and they're working with the same caveat as well, and we're a lot of municipalities are already looking at a situation where they approve budgets in February or March. So we're a bit unusual even in that we're in a position to have the discussion. Most of our neighbors, it's just kind of the already approved, and it is the way that it is.
So
Sir?
it really...
Yeah, Eric.
Fire away.
Sorry, Kathy, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I agree. I understand all your concerns, and I'm glad you're in close communication with the village. And we have to proceed with this. We have a timeline. The village has a timeline. This is just the way the business gets done. But we have to look at. It's one thing to have a budget, but under the circumstances, we have to look at spending and long-term planning with extraordinary caution. The PTEL is going to go down in whether it's a year or two. I mean, it takes a long time for that to catch up, but the CPI is going to take a hit, which means the PTEL is going to go down, which means our revenues are going to go down. Passport fees, which has been a real positive for us, is probably going to go down. Interest is probably going to go down. There's just a lot of expenses that the staff, you and the staff have developed very nicely, but through no control of our own, we're probably going to lose money there. So we have to be very, very, very cautious and, I mean, beyond cautious in terms of making decisions. I use fines as an example of just anything that we're spending money on, and also reallocating things as necessary. As you say, to suddenly, really beef up digital borrowings because that's what our patrons are using at that time. So obviously we've got to proceed with the budget, but we've got to be careful with it, and you've got to be creative month after month after month with all of your resources on what you're doing with them and preparing for the future. Because I think it's going to get, hopefully everybody's good health will return, but the health of the economy will not for quite some time.
Unfortunately true. And you're absolutely right on all points, and something we're already spending an increasing amount of time on is really just looking at those expenses and thinking, you know, what do we need to get done? What are the resources we need to do it? And thinking conservatively and projecting out how do we ensure that we're able to do the most for the community over the next 4, 5, 6, 7 months through this, and while being responsible stewards for the library as a resource.
Right.
This is Bill. I've got a question or maybe a concern. When we do open, what sort of precautions or things are you hearing about for people concerning about cleaning with books? And I guess we still don't know enough about the COVID-19 to sort of understand the whole aspects of it. But are people going to be concerned with, again, you've got plastic covers on books, whether the COVID-19 would stick 72 hours, if it's on paper, it'll be something less. Do we think that we're going to run into a situation where the cleaning or sanitization of materials is going to be a big impact to our expenses and actually to people coming and using the library?
Well, I wasn't able to be in attendance, but I was fortunate enough to have some access to the recording. There was a webinar on Monday through the Institute of Museum and Library Science that offered an opportunity for librarians to engage with an epidemiologist from the CDC. And basically the topic of the discussion was exactly that. In a coronavirus world, how do we come at reopening the libraries in a manner that A, establishes the safety of the facility, but also B, communicates to the public that we are approaching this in a knowledgeable and professional manner and taking our responsibilities to provide a safe space very seriously. Information was very good. It was great to be able to have members of the library community engage. I know that there were a number of librarians here in the area that were present there and asked some questions, some really good questions. We did get a lot of good feedback in terms of what the understanding is now as far as how long it stays viable, how long the virus stays viable. With the collection pretty well shut down at the moment, the stuff in the libraries pretty good just because it's just sitting there and the virus would not stay viable long enough on the materials that are just sitting there. The greater question really is the materials that'll be coming back, which given the trend of the pandemic at present, we're probably heading towards a likelihood where at least some of the materials that'll be coming back eventually will have been out with in a home where there was some coronavirus happening. So there was some good discussion there as well as far as the appropriate handling and letting that first wave of materials sit so that appropriate amount of time is given before things are recirculated. The different cleaning solutions that can be applied. I imagine that we'll continue to get further guidance. Fingers crossed there'll be an increasing solidification of the understanding of what you need to do to ensure that this virus isn't on surfaces. I already feel like we're a lot clearer on that than we were, and can only hope that that continues to firm up. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it's no. I mean, I've got the same dealings in the manufacturing world of what we're trying to deal with, and
Yeah.
it's interesting how we have to approach it a little differently because we, in certain cases, we're down as an essential supplier to the infrastructure, and we're open and we are cleaning all the time. But these sort of questions come up with deliveries and things, and it just occurred as far as from a library standpoint, the materials in there, especially like you said, the materials coming back. Again, you let it sit for 9 days, 14 days, and you're assuming the virus is dead at that point.
Yeah. The good news, as I understand it, is that paper is similar enough to cardboard that it doesn't live long on paper.
Right. Yeah.
What's more of a challenge is the dust jackets and the cases for the CDs and the DVDs, which are of course plastic, where it, from what I read, the virus tends to last longer.
Yeah.
It'll be a challenge, and honestly, I think as a staff we are all heartily looking forward to the challenge of getting the library open again. Just because that would mean that we're, I think, a lot farther along at that point than we are now. Any other questions on the budget? Do I still have sound, or did I lose sound?
No, you're
Okay.
still. Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah,
a
we're
long,
just waiting
just a
for
long
you,
pause. Okay, sorry, I didn't hear anything there for a moment, and I thought maybe I'd lost my audio again. Okay, if there's no other questions or comments on the budget, I would look for a motion to approve.
I so move that we approve this budget. This is Cal.
Second?
Second, John.
Okay, going through the roll call vote. Trustee Butler.
Yes.
Trustee Hayes.
Yes.
Trustee Heinzelman.
Yes.
Trustee Jackson.
Yes.
Trustee Church.
Yes.
Trustee Meyerhoff.
Yes.
Trustee Stroh.
Yes.
Excellent. Budget passes, and I will be certain that our friends at the village have that for inclusion alongside the village's budget in terms of the public hearing process. That takes us to our next item listed on new business, which dovetails really with the item that I had added then at the start, which is our friend COVID-19. So the past couple weeks have been kind of a whirlwind of planning and lists and very abrupt segues to different models of business for the library. So really, in a large way, a big section of the library's usual service model was really suddenly out of order and closed off, shut off a few weeks ago. And then we saw at the same time a big need and shift towards the digital services, as well as a new strong need for services that hadn't really had much of a community desire before. So we have been spending a lot of time on content for social media and the website, We are issuing cards online. We're doing seeds, sending those out via the mail for the Victory Garden program. I am very proud and encouraged by how efficient, hardworking, and creative the library staff has been through all of this. A lot of great ideas, both in terms of proactively anticipating some of the issues that we ended up having to work through with the closing, but then also turning around and shifting gears to identifying needs and opportunities within the community. We've got a lot of things that we still need to work and pull together, but I'm fully confident that we're going to keep at it. So, any particular questions on COVID-19? I know that for those who did not see it, the governor did extend the shelter-in-place guidelines through April the 30th. He was expected to do that, so it wasn't too much of a surprise, though it's still kind of as with a lot of these reminders, as far as what a long haul this current pandemic can potentially end up being, still kind of a oof. Not exactly great to see it on paper.
Eric, Kathy. Hello?
Hello.
Yep.
I'm
Hello.
here.
Yeah, Eric, can you fill us in on signing, what we're going to do about signing checks?
Yes, definitely. So I did follow up with the bank, and in a exciting moment of foresight, when we last updated the register for the signers, I did end up included on there just in case of an emergency situation where checks needed to be signed. And I think we thought at the moment a situation where there was an unexpected expense and trustees were traveling. But in an emergency situation like this, it's helpful as well. So I can act as a signer on those to minimize the number of people that need to come in contact with the documents. That would put us in a position of just needing one additional member of the library board to act as a signer for the two signatures on there. Jamie, I know
Can we somehow,
Yes, Janie
can we
here.
somehow,
Hi. I guess Eric and I will work out some way. I think I'm the one who lives closest and I'm not planning on going anywhere. And so either I will walk up to the library with a clipboard and sit outside and sign them, or Eric will walk up to my house and I will sign them on a clipboard. Eric, you really don't need to bring a little table over. That's not necessary.
I have this all
And
worked out in my mind. I have this all worked out. I'll bring the little table. I'll set the checks on it halfway up to the house. I'll go
yeah,
back, wait at the
exactly.
car, and for you somebody to come out and sign.
We'll just,
Raining.
well, okay, this is Kathy. I have another plan, another thought. I know you, and I will say that Eric and I have chatted about this about a week ago. And our council reached out to the library about, being prepared for a situation like this. Is there any way, I know you talked to Sita at the bank, is there any way that the trustees or the officers or the signees can release the need for two signatures at this time and just allow the director to sign checks in a time of emergency or, with some kind of oversight? I mean, if we could do something with the bylaws to free up a little table in front of Janie's house. Although I
Yeah.
appreciate that, Janie, very much. But it's just wonder, and I think we talked about, a signing authority of like $5,000. I mean, some obvious built-in controls, blah, blah, blah. But, the library is closed. I don't even know how the checks are getting to you kind of thing. So that's, I just wonder if that is, typically now the bank is going to look for two names, and is there somehow we can shorten that process?
My understanding at this time is that we would still need to go through the process for updating what we've got on file as far as the requirements for the account. That would mean that we would need approval signatures from the folks that are currently on there. I can follow up with CETA on that for additional details to really flesh that out.
Yeah.
But that's my understanding from the initial conversations, and that kind of puts us in kind of a weighing of options situation there, where if we wanted to go that route, we would still need to go through the process of getting those initial signatures, but then once we did that we would be well set up to run very efficiently with just a single signature.
Right.
Janie here, I really think given what you just outlined as what we would have to do to institute those measures is probably more complicated than me just signing them out on the sidewalk or you walking them down to my house or whatever. So
Okay.
for now,
In May, if there's any change in officers, we have to redo signature cards anyway. So this might be,
Yes.
Eric, if you could do a little investigation, this might be the time to consider all these options for the future, because if we have any change in leadership, we're going to have to redo the signatures. That would be, I guess, perhaps a way to facilitate this as well. So just something to, this is something we never expected, but
Right.
always be prepared for the future.
Right. And that's, that you're absolutely right. That makes a lot of sense. May then would be, if we had a change in who the officers were, we would be looking to get that information updated with the bank anyway. That would be a good time to really take a look at that and evaluate how we have that set up in terms of current and future needs.
Yeah. And Janie, thank you for offering to help out on this. Thank you.
oh, no problem.
You're a good egg, Janie. Okay, before we move on, any other questions on service in the age of coronavirus? Okay, I'll segue then on, before going to the director's report, very quickly, an update on the fundraising process. Before the world went a little sideways, we did have some good progress on that. The folders and the prospectuses that will go inside those folders, both of which look amazing, were sent to the printer.
Yep.
And
Yeah, they really
are. Go ahead, John.
they're really amazing. It's one of the best I've ever seen. So yeah, you guys did a great job on that.
Thank you.
Pros couldn't have done any better. So congratulations.
Yay.
That was Martha and Jillian did the work on those, and they did an absolutely fabulous job.
They did. Yep.
Alas, our next step was really segueing from.
Eric, if you could just, I'm sorry to interrupt. If we could just also share that Vogue Printers made a very generous deduction in their billing, and they would now be considered a sponsor of the foundation. So we're very grateful. Martha kind of facilitated the contact there, and they were very willing to help us out very generously. So we're very happy about that.
Yes.
Here, what printer is that?
Vogue, like
Vogue,
the magazine.
Vogue?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so those are underway. Unfortunately, the next part of the process there would really be setting up those face-to-face meetings with the potential major donors, and there's some obvious problems at the moment with trying to set up a face-to-face meeting with anyone. So that next step, unfortunately, is on hold of necessity.
Yeah, nobody, John, nobody is really doing face-to-face meetings right now anywhere. So,
Yeah.
as far as I'm aware.
And
So,
John, you would have to correct me on this, but just some of the economic uncertainty, the ups and downs with the current closures as well might not be to our benefit. Even if things
oh no,
come out of it in a downward trend, I think that might be more advantageous as far as at least people would know where things were.
yeah,
Things
no,
stood.
it's going to be a tough year. And the CARES Act really hasn't helped us because they delayed the you don't have to take an RMD for a year. So anyone that was thinking of doing a rollover, they can let their IRAs ride for another year. So, you know, yeah, it's not going to be a good year. Sorry.
Well, nothing for you to apologize for, John. It's just being the bearer of the news.
I guess they were one of the proposals was the $300 deduction for non-itemizers. I think one of the proposals was to make that $4,000. That got defeated. So that's not going to help us much.
30 minutes.
I had a question. You know, how is Kathy doing?
Kathy's doing good.
Yes. Okay.
Kathy, by reason of, and this is Kathy Siebert, our development coordinator. I've stayed in touch with her via email. I've tried to brainstorm a little bit how we might come up with some things for her to do remotely. But she's in a position where, due to health reasons, she's in a vulnerable category. So in discussion with her, really, I think, for her to be particularly careful, I think was a joint decision that we landed on.
Okay.
But she's at home and she's being careful and she's doing good.
Okay. Well,
it's not, unfortunately, a lot for her to really jump in on at the moment. We did have the week before the closing. We'd started the process of getting her trained on some additional responsibilities at the library in helping out at the reference and circulation desk, and we were also looking at the possibility of having her maybe assist on occasion filling in youth services to meet a couple different needs. Firstly, to give Kathy a kind of a closer view and broader sense of exactly what we do at the library and what the campaign is in support of, and also to provide provide a little bit broader pool of coverage for some of those responsibilities, which is something that we're pretty much always on the lookout for. And Kathy was very excited about the opportunity to, dig in a little bit more to a lot of those activities that she's, observed going on.
Sure. And the more she gets involved, the better for development purposes as well. She'll understand the operation that much better.
Right.
Yeah. So, okay.
So I think it's a good thing, and I had been looking forward to a situation where, we were offering her some pretty regular opportunities to be involved there with the operations, particularly at the main desk. But
yeah,
then we ended up when we weren't having operations at the main desk anymore, and that was kind of that.
Right. No.
So I do foresee that, Kathy has very much indicated that she's, still in it for the long haul, and I anticipate her, picking up with that where we left off when we are able to reopen.
Great. Okay.
Okay, so I believe that summarizes everything that we've got as far as the fundraising. I did send out, there was some discussion as far as the reimbursement schedule at the last meeting for the foundation to the library for the expenses related to Kathy Siebert's payroll, as well as to some of the expenses that were related with the printing from Vogue, as well as with the trivia event in the fall. So um, just forwarded that out as an Excel spreadsheet to really break those numbers out. Any of the numbers that the library is working with are, of course, always available to the public. So happy to pass those along. Take a look. If anybody has any questions on those, please do feel free to ask. On that note, I would segue over to the director's report. I do have a couple items that haven't come up yet to highlight. One, unfortunately, is a bit of sad news. I learned this afternoon that our friends at 22nd Media, who are the owners of the Lake Forest Leader, have gone out of business. And that's an outcome of the steep decline in ad revenue available to them since shelter in place and the other restrictions that have been affecting the economy went into effect. So that's really too bad. They always gave us a lot of good coverage and
Eric,
were very pleasant to work with.
this is
Yes.
Cal. I just got an email from them today saying that they were stopping their print edition, but that you could access them online. That's not quite the same as going out of business. So do you know which is which?
Jillian, you can feel free to jump in if you like. I believe you heard, I saw a news article that I think stated that they had let everybody go.
The I had gotten the same information from another person who's a subscriber. This happened pretty immediately, but the information came from Glenn Cole at the Village. So I think that they're pretty much canceling everything and shutting down immediately.
Okay.
So yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Yeah, the articles that I can see here state that they're ceasing operations. So it's too bad.
Yeah, it is too bad.
Um, Janie did also pass on another bit of news to me that's also falls, alas, under that category, um, which was that our longtime member of the community and former president of Lake Bluff, Christine Lechinger, is not doing well. She's moving into a hospice care situation.
Oh my
So,
goodness.
For Eric, she's actually having hospice at the house.
yeah,
She's staying home.
right. I should have clarified. It's hospice care, but it's not going to a hospice. It's hospice care that is coming to.
Yeah.
And she has
Correct.
family that are coming into, flying into town to be with her, and some family that's already there. So my understanding from the email, Janie, that you had shared was that members of the community are being encouraged to send her cards, well wishes, and things of that nature.
Correct. Yeah, they don't want any visitors and they don't want any food or anything like that, flowers, any of that dropped off, um, for obvious reasons. And so they're just asking that we reach out and flood Chris with messages of love in the Lake Bluff way. And
Janie, do you by any chance have an email for her to
if you
facilitate
have
this?
a relationship and you want to, just say what she has meant to you, that would be very, very meaningful to her and her family.
Jenny, I'm sorry. I don't know if do you know, is there an email for Chris or for someone in the family
Yes,
that we
it's
could
very
send
easy.
messages to?
It's very easy. It's just C. Letchinger, no dot between them. Does everybody know how to spell her last name?
No.
I'll spell it out. It's CLETCHINGER @gmail.com.
Okay.
Okay.
That's the email that I've got for her as well. I can send that out to everybody so that
Thanks, Eric.
you can have it in writing too.
Will you please repeat that again, the whole address?
Yes. CLETCHINGER @gmail.com.
Thank you.
And I'll get that sent out right away after the meeting as well so that everybody can have that in writing too.
Yeah.
Been a long-time member of the community, done a lot of good things. I think it says a lot about her personality that, from what I understand, she's expressed a lot of disappointment that she's not going to be able to finish the displays that she was working on pulling together for the museum. She's always been somebody that was worked very hard, been very determined, and a lot of that very much directed towards the community. So it's
This is Cal. I did not know that she was ill. How long has she been ill?
I think it's a couple years. Is that right, Janie?
It's been about 2 years.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Well, she
What
lives
a lot of
couple-
you might not know is also Christine championed a donor drive many years ago. Her husband was in need of a bone marrow transplant, and she really got that going. And he did receive a donor, and things went well for a long time. So she's a real hero of mine. She when she puts her mind to something, she got it done. So she will be missed in our town.
Yeah.
her talents were many and will be missed.
Yeah.
So on that note, that's everything that I have as far as the subject matter for the meeting this evening. I should tie back in. We touched on a little bit the item of the emergency authority. If we reached a situation where an extension of either the directors or the board president's authority was needed in order to act quickly and effectively on behalf of the library, then there is a template that's been made available to us by legal counsel that we could use to do that. In looking through the different powers, including those that are available built into the bylaws already for making some of these decisions, I think right now we're pretty well set up for anything that we would need to get done. So my recommendation is not to pursue that at this time. I think we're pretty well situated in terms of being able to cope with what we've got going on. So almost forgot about that one. And on that note, I now truly don't have anything else, and would look for a motion to adjourn unless anyone has anything else to add.
I've just got one thing, Eric, as a spell. the Friends meeting, I'm assuming that one's going to get cancelled, or have they, the one in April?
Yes, that's, yeah.
Okay.
Martha was working on that today, actually following the governor's extension of the shelter in place, getting all of those officially canceled.
Okay.
So yeah, that's unfortunately off the books.
Which
Eric,
meeting are
this
you?
is Scott. I would just say, for me in conclusion, to say thank you to you for putting this together tonight. This is a very unusual situation, and you communicated very effectively with all of us. So I really appreciate it.
I would second that.
I agree.
Yes,
me as well.
absolutely.
Well, and I definitely reciprocate that. As Martha noted, there's been a few on some of the listservs out here. There's been a few boards, alas, some of them in the area and somewhat close to us, that have had some responses to all of this that really make you sit back and go, "Holy cow!" So, I do feel very grateful to have such a great group of folks to work with. And I look forward to being able to work with all of you on less depressing subject matter, hopefully in some of the months ahead.
Agreed.
Well, we will. I think we'll be meeting like this in April, so hopefully we're getting pretty good at it. So we'll need to
I
do that
think,
as well.
yeah, I think the governor's extension today makes that pretty much a certainty.
Right.
And Eric, I will follow up with you so we can get going on setting up an HR meeting for sometime in April.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay. On that note, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
I so move. That's Cal.
Okay, Cal.
John seconds. John seconds.
Got it.
I think we can probably at this point just go with a regular voice vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone against? All right, all in favor. Excellent. Thank you all for
Thanks, Eric.
logging in for the meeting this evening. Take care. Stay well.
You too.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Godspeed,
Right.
everyone. Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.